catch up with what's going on in the Arab world. So, for example, I was in one of those brainstorming sessions that tried to talk about what's next for Palestine and Israel. And what amazes me is that everything that they speak about has an Israel reference to it, because that's where the correspondents for their main networks are, that's where their people are, and that's how they've seen the region, Egypt, Palestine, and so on, from Israel's prisms. So every point of reference is, what did Netanyahu say? What does Israel think? What would the Israeli lobby consider? Would now, for example, President Obama do this and that, and will the Israeli lobby allow him? What does that mean for our strategic interests in the Middle East? Not understanding that there is a complete sweep that requires not only a change of mindset, and if you allow me here, a change of decision makers, perhaps, or a change of aides in Washington. There's a complete class of bureaucrats in Washington that are not only not in touch with what's going on in America, they're certainly not in touch with what's going on in the Arab world.
Well, Noam Chomsky, I'd like to follow up on that. The Times had an interesting article today, apparently an Obama administration leak, that the administration had, the president for more than a year had requested this study that predicted the possible outbreak of popular movements throughout the region. Samantha Power was involved in preparing this report, as if to say, well, we were on top of the situation, even though we weren't. We knew that this was coming. And your sense of to what degree Washington is able to respond, or even is really aware of what's going on in the region?
It's hard to believe that they're not aware of it. I mean, you can read it in the newspapers. There have been demonstrations and protests going on for years. A big protest in 2005. You know, they keep being repressed, and they're more. In fact, the current wave of protests actually began last November in Western Sahara, Morocco, which is under Moroccan rule after a brutal invasion and occupation. The Moroccan forces came in, carried out, destroyed the tent cities, a lot of killed, wounded, and so on. And then it spread. You have to be pretty.
Western Sahara is hardly known about their rebellion there, the occupation there.
I mean, it's a major atrocity. It's kind of like East Timor, in fact, pretty much the same, even the same time. But it's blowing up, and also they must read the studies of Arab public opinion. I mean, you can't imagine an intelligence service that doesn't read the regular studies by Western polling agencies of Arab public opinion. And if you look at them, you can see why democracy is such a frightening concept. The latest major study last August, released by the Brookings Institute, so not very obscure, showed that almost nobody in the Arab world regards Iran as a threat, 10%. What they regard as a threat is the United States and Israel, like 80, 90%. In fact, a majority even favor Iran having nuclear weapons to balance U.S.-Israeli power, which is the real threat in the Arab world. You take a look at when they list people who are respected. Erdogan, Turkey, is way up on top. Obama isn't even listed. You get down to Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, no Obama. Now these are the opinions of people in the Arab world. What you said about the bureaucrats and the aides is absolutely correct. I mean, after all, there have been 60 years in which explicit policy, in writing, has been internal records, has been to disregard the Arab population as long as they can be kept under control.
So is perhaps the reticence of the administration, in case of Egypt, let's say, or right now in Bahrain, more geared to the fact that they know that public opinion and they understand that a real democracy in the region would mean another Latin America, another region totally out of U.S. ability to dominate?
I don't talk to anybody in Washington, so I can only guess, but it is simply inconceivable that at least the intelligence services don't go as far as reading polls that I can read.